We're in the midst of a huge transformation where peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am super excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Amber Bollinger. She is the incoming Chief People Officer at Change Companies and former Chief Experience Officer at Remarkable Health, acquired by Netsmart Technologies. Amber, thank you for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Sure. Hi, Christina. It's great to be here with you. I appreciate AllVoices doing these webinars. They're so helpful. So thank you for inviting me to join you. So Amber Bollinger, like you said, Chief Experience Officer at Remarkable Health is my most recent role, transitioning into a Chief People Officer role at the Change Companies. My pronouns are she, her. And the question, what do you want to be when you grew up? Well, I remember being in high school and I was a diehard Chicago Bulls fan. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs in the 90s. Michael Jordan was all the rage, leading the Bulls to championship after championship. So there was a female broadcaster back then named Hannah Storm, who was the broadcaster on the floor, on the court for the NBA. And she was the only female at the time. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to be the next Hannah Storm. I want to be a broadcast journalist, and I want to cover the NBA. So that's what I wanted to do until I realized how extremely competitive that field was and how tough of a job that might be to get. So I talked to my high school guidance counselor and he's, said, what do you like to do? What do you enjoy doing? And I was like, well, I like talking. What can I do with that? So that kind of growing up, I didn't know what human resources was, didn't know it existed, didn't know it was going to be something that I would love to do and kind of just fell into it. But it's not quite the NBA broadcast journalism role, but it certainly has its exciting moments.
Yes, I'm sure there's a lot of exciting moments and more to come in your upcoming role as well. And you fast forward to today from thinking about that dream when you were younger. How do you think your personal journey since then has really led you to this point in your career?
Yeah. So I've always found the greatest value in helping others in any capacity. And when I got into my career in human resources, I realized that this is a way to help people enjoy their jobs in their careers. We spend so much time at work. No one wants to go to a place that they don't enjoy being or they're miserable when you spend so much time there. So I saw great value in being able to help make that positive and impactful career place to work for others. So, that was a win for me. And I was very fortunate to work with some amazing leaders that I learned a ton from and who took risks on me and allowed me to move up the HR ladder fairly quickly. And that's kind of led me to where I am today, just really working for some people who believed in me and who gave me a lot of really great opportunities. And I enjoy doing it. I feel very fulfilled by my work. And I genuinely care about the employees and the success of the business, and being able to merge those two is a really great place to be.
I appreciate what you said about kind of creating that positive experience and really working with leaders who support that as well. I would agree with you that most of us need to work, and we want to work for places that are empowering, that really care about us as people, and have a great kind of company culture. And knowing that company culture is something that is dynamic, especially as new people join the team, some people leave. It's always changing. How do you think about really measuring company culture? Are there any key performance indicators you typically look at or experiences there?
Yeah. So to me, overall, company culture is measured by successful outcomes, right? If you have healthy culture, you're succeeding, your business is succeeding in all ways. And so we used at Remarkable Health EOS, which is Entrepreneurial Operating System. So it's basically an operating system, a way of having a common way to measure, success, as well as language spoken in the business processes and whatnot. And with EOS, each department has a scorecard. And so that scorecard is metrics that are most important to that area of the business. And they look at them weekly in a meeting, and they have a target they're trying to get every week. We should see it moving this much and we should be at this spot. And so if it's off track, it turns red. And if it's on track, it's green. And so you want to stay in the green. And if something's in the red, right away, we're talking about it as a team going, okay, let's talk about this. How do we get it back on track? Why did it fall off track? Does it still make sense? So just that constant looking at how we're doing, trending towards what those success outcomes are, and talking about it. And it's okay if something's off track. It's okay if there's an obstacle. The important thing is that we recognize it, we talk about it, and we work through it, so that we can get back on track. So that's one of the ways that we use metrics in measuring culture. Each employee also has rocks. EOS uses the term rocks, but essentially it's goals. So quarterly goals, and we're looking at those every week to see, are you on track, off track on where you should be at this point in the quarter. So every week, someone has the opportunity to raise their hand and say, I'm off track, I need help. And so that way we're, again, just every week staying on top of what we're supposed to be doing and helping each other out if there's any issues. But more specifically, HR wise, on the people side of things, of course, retention is a metric that helps us to measure culture. If people want to stay, then you're doing something right, right? And then we did quarterly employee net promoter score, which is basically asking employees, would you recommend this as a place for someone else to work? And then areas for comments. And so we could see if anything changes trend wise in a specific department right away. And then we did, of course, an annual kind of employee engagement survey to measure those. So those are some metrics on the people side we look at. But to me, culture is all about, if you are meeting the goals and objectives or exceeding them, then you have a healthy culture, because people are able to be productive and engaged. And you see that, of course, through ways, in the culture itself. You have open dialogue, you have constructive conflict, and it's accepted, it's expected, that you are pointing out if you don't agree with something and talking through it. There's laughter, attendance is great, retention is
Yeah.
strong. There's that true sense of purpose and belonging. So those, of course, are all things we look at more from a qualitative, but on the quantitative, we use those metrics and those scorecards for each department.
Yeah, looking at those outcomes, those scorecards, and also having common language to say, I'm off track, I need help, and not being afraid to lean into those conversations and collaboratively kind of work together to resolve those two. They all are really intentionally cultivated and something that's worked on together. You mentioned that qualitative piece, which is also really important. I know at the beginning in the intro, I shared a little bit about kind of Remarkable Health, and when it was acquired by Netsmart Technologies. You're the Chief
Mhm.
Experience Officer. What was the strategy for really integrating teams there and building kind of a new collaborative company culture there together and identifying common frameworks? And what did that really kind of look like?
Yeah, so I mean, that really went back to just the acquisition process itself. When we made the decision that it was the right time to go to market with Remarkable Health, we had a lot of interest and a lot of buyers. And so it was super important to see what those cultures that currently existed were of those companies that were interested in purchasing us, because it was important that they kept the team intact. That was very important to us, that they wanted not just the products, but they wanted the people, and that they had a very similar outlook on company culture that we did. So that was the first step, is just making the right choice first, and so we did a lot of diligence in looking into that. And then getting on board, it was a little bit challenging because we came from a very small organization that was 100% virtual. We went 100% virtual in 2020, sold our office space, and we were acquired by Netsmart Technologies, which is primarily an in-person office environment. So they, bought this company that's all virtual team across the US and different places. So um, one of the things that was super important was that communication. And we kept our team pretty intact, but what we had to start doing is just inviting team members from Netsmart to come into like our meetings and our groups and their team, inviting people over. So the first thing I had to do was figure out those connections. Who needs to get to know and build relationships with who on the Netsmart side, who's kind of doing the same job over there, who are your new team members going to be, and creating those relationships and connections. And so a lot of Zoom meetings to just create introductions, trying to do some fun get to know you type trivia and exercises to have a little bit of fun, but kind of learn some fun facts. You know, people connect great through like, what's your favorite sports team? Are you a dog person or a cat person? And just kind of creating those similarities to build off of. So the first month was really just about creating relationships with the people that they were going to be working with day to day. And they have not met them in person, so it's not been in an office. It's been virtual all along. So that's really the only way to do that. But some of the other things that have been very different is just, size of organization. You go from a small organization to a large organization. Everybody. Everybody at Remark Health knew everybody. We knew who to go to for what and who did what. And then you go into a larger organization and you don't know who to go to for what, because there's so many people and it's like, where do I start? So my primary role has really been to be the go-to person for the Remarkable Health team to say, I need to figure out who to ask this question to, and I'll seek it out. So I'm kind of the connector, and the role that they've given me is kind of integration executive. And so it's temporary to just for the 6-month period merge the two businesses. And the role for me is really just helping the Remarkable Health employees find their spot and their space in the new organization and creating those connections and, removing obstacles and roadblocks that come up, so they don't have to spend time searching through the directory of, okay, which person handles this, and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of been the main things that we've been focused on right away.
I mean, that is a lot to focus on, creating those meaningful moments of connection, being the chief integration officer, as you were talking about, and really removing barriers for folks to succeed and get the resources that they need as well. And I know in our previous conversation, we also talked about how you change roles from chief people officer to intentionally chief experience officer and integrator, meaning you're the only direct report to the chief executive officer as well, which is really unique. Where did you kind of start in fully learning the full business operations, and how did you kind of communicate during that change as well to all of the different team members of all of the things that are happening?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we used EOS. And so EOS has this organizational structure where you have a visionary, which is typically your CEO. It's like the idea person. And I notice I still look like I have horns. So the idea person, change my position here. But your innovator, who is your thought leader, who is out there in the market making your business, your products, your services known. And then you have an integrator who's really responsible for managing the day-to-day operations of the business. So the visionary says, I have this idea, and they pass it off to the integrator, and it's like, okay, now make it happen. So that's kind of the roles that we played. And so the CEO had approached me about, would I be willing to take on this integrator role? And part of the integrator role is that all of the organization reports up into you. So the chief technology officer, sales and marketing, finance, customer success, all the areas of the business. So at first I was like, I'm the people person. That's a lot of risk. I don't know about engineering, right? How am I going to how is the CTO going to report to me? But what was really great about it is we have an amazing, amazing leadership team, and they fully supported it. And they said, yes, we think that's a great idea. We would love that. And we had great relationships. So there's always a little bit of that challenge of going from peer to boss, right? Of, okay, these guys were my peers and now they're going to report to me. This could be a little uncomfortable. I was a little afraid it wasn't going to work out, but it really worked out fantastic. But that all goes back to kind of having the right people on the leadership team to begin with. So I took on that role, and the first thing I did was I started to sit in on the weekly meetings. As I mentioned, each department has a weekly meeting where they're talking about their issues, their rocks, their metrics. And so I started to sit in and observe those to just learn about what each area of the business was focused on and what their issues were, and how, if they were on track or off track. And if they're off track, why are they off track? And started to see a lot of areas of opportunity in the business with relation to processes and alignment and cross-functional communication that really allowed us to make some changes in the business to really get traction and move forward. And without having that kind of one person who sees how they all fit together. Like I see here in one meeting, they need something from another department, and the other department is not aware. Like they just, the communication is not happening in the way it should. And so I was kind of that connector piece, and really, role was to kind of remove obstacles and build alignment. And like I mentioned, the leadership team was super great. So I met with each of them weekly and had a one-on-one as well, and would share observations. And I literally had an Excel spreadsheet with tabs of each leader's name on the bottom. And I would like make notes, like I have to remember to tell this person this, and I have to remember to tell this person this. And so then I would check it off after I had the conversation, because it just was sharing information, sharing information. And it was such a rewarding role to be in, because as the chief people officer, I kind of had my people bubble, like, everything is awesome, like HR, we're all happy, everything's good. If I'm not hearing from employees, everything's wonderful. But, I wasn't hearing from them because they weren't seeing some of the challenges they were having as HR issues or grievances or concerns that you would normally look to like a people ops person. But they were more just process and obstacles and getting their jobs done that we could remove. So I think it's a great opportunity for anyone who's in a people role, HR role, to really learn about the operations of the business and what employees are experiencing in their different functional areas, because it really opens the door to see the business in a new way and to say, yeah, they might be satisfied and happy, but they are getting frustrated every day by this obstacle in their job. And if I can remove that, what a great difference that would make in their experience. It would take it from an 8 to a 10, So I think that has been one of the most rewarding positions. And I came up with the chief experience officer role, because I was like, well, why wasn't it just COO? Because COO sounded so like analytical to me. Like, it was all about operations, and I'm like such the people person, like it's all about the people. So I read this Harvard Business Review article that says why every company needs a chief experience officer. And I read that, and I went to our CEO and I said, that's it. That's the role. It's not a COO, it's not a chief people officer, it's a chief experience officer. It's really about everything we do in the business is about providing the best possible experience for our internal teams, as well as for some client or customer, right? If you're building a product, you want the end user to have the best experience. And so if you have employees that are having an amazing experience, what they do every day is going to be that commitment to providing that amazing customer client experience. And so just connecting the two, and everything in the business was ultimately about just providing a fabulous experience. So
Absolutely.
That's where that came from.
Yes, I love the title of Chief Experience Officer. I think the words that we use really matter as well to encapsulate what we mean by it. And I also appreciate your example of the spreadsheet and the different tabs, super organized. I could definitely relate to that in terms of type A and just managing all of these sources of information and effective communication. And it sounds like there was a lot to be learned throughout the process as well. Are there any other kind of key learnings that you've experienced at Remarkable Health, either pre or post acquisition, that you want to share with folks who are listening?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of organizations learned this in the last couple of years, but learning that a virtual work environment can be even more productive and effective than an in-office environment. And I think prior to us going 100% virtual, we had a few remote employees, but there was always a little bit of the perception of, oh, maybe they don't work as hard or as long. And, there's a little bit of that, characterizing remote work that
Uh-huh.
has changed a lot. Yeah. And when we went remote, it really helped advance us in a way that we didn't expect. Everyone was on a level playing field. We have Zoom meeting and you can see everyone's faces rather than when you're in a meeting room in an office and everyone around the table is very engaged and you kind of forget about the couple faces on the screen. When everyone's on the screen, it's like level playing field. Our social experiences, we ended up having even greater turnout because rather than time when employees would want to leave the office to go home and be with their families or do their social activities after work, now we are having social activities virtually, which this is the time you'd usually be in the car driving. So now you can hang out a little bit longer with your teammates and do some fun stuff. So we had better engagement in social um, virtual opportunities that we created, and we had stronger communication, and we were hitting our metrics more. So, things like our sprint output was higher. The number of new tickets that we had coming in declined. The time to close cases improved. Customer satisfaction went up. Employee NPS and employee engagement went up. Turnover went down. And within the 2 years of being virtual, like all of our metrics were up. So it was like, why didn't we do this before? And of course, we were saving money because you weren't spending, in office. So I think um, that was one of the key learnings for me and our CEO. He was very non-remote supporter until we did it. He was the first one, I think 2 months in, he called me up. He's like, we should do this permanently. And I was like, yes. So I think that was definitely a key learning that I appreciate. And I know there's still a lot of organizations who are a little nervous and afraid, and of course, not every business will support a 100% virtual environment, but there are ways to still do that in a hybrid fashion and be able to, reap the benefits of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a lot of teams and companies have really leaned into remote work. And I definitely know organizations that were in butts and seats all about the optics of just working longer and things of that nature and really trusting your employees as well. And also, a lot of teams have leaned into innovation during challenging times as well in terms of the employee experience, really auditing that process and making sure that everybody feels like they can do their best work. This can be at any organization, but can you tell me about kind of a way that you have redesigned systems in the past to be more equitable, whether it's a process, policy, or initiative that you are super proud of?
Yeah, I think the one that stands out to me is the way that we were doing employee recognition and awards. When I
Yeah.
came on board to Remarkable Health, we had one quarterly award, and the leadership team voted on who got that every quarter. And it was tend to go to the folks who are more vocal or whose leaders are more vocal, right? Because a lot of recognition, if it's voted on the leadership, it's which leader is coming in and promoting their team members the greatest. And that's where you're going to see the awards going. So what I did is I added 3 new awards quarterly and an annual award kind of tied to the company's values. But the biggest piece of it is that they were nominated by their peers, and the person who had the greatest nominations won, and they had to provide context too. They couldn't just give a name. Like, you had to say, here's an example. So like, one of the awards was the Relentless Award, and it was, someone who was relentless in their efforts this quarter to learn and solve an issue that moved the company forward. And so share the example and nominate. So it went from just being a senior leader, we're going to pick this person, to peers nominating and giving examples. If there was a tie, of course, the senior leadership team would use the context of the nominations and then select the tiebreaker. But what this did is it opened up the door for areas of the business that weren't being recognized, even though their contributions were great. Specifically, our engineering department, they're kind of behind the scenes, so it's not like we're getting customer emails raving about what they're doing and making it obvious. because they're kind of in the background, but they're going above and beyond and doing a lot of things that just weren't getting recognized. So I think changing that to a peer nomination process really helped to make it a more fair and equitable, recognition process.
Yeah, I love that example. It's really important, especially when you are working collaboratively with teams and really recognizing the folks that you are working with as well. And that's exciting too when somebody gets recognized in front of the organization as well. Looking to the future, I know that you are the incoming Chief People Officer at another organization, Change Companies.
Yeah.
What was a key question you asked during the interview process for the next job that was really important to you?
Yeah. So I think, to me, the most important thing was just asking the business, how do you see me adding value to the business? Like, what role do you see me playing? And making sure that the responses that I received were aligned with what I felt would add value to the organization, and that we were aligned. And that's not like they were asking me to come in and put together like a big old policy and procedure manual and a bunch of rules, and like just, that we had the same kind of outlook on what's expected of somebody in a chief people officer role. So that was probably, the most important question to me that I asked.
I love that. I think that's a great question and also a good conversation starter as well to see where there is alignment, where there is opportunity to co-create that together. Is there anything that I didn't ask in our conversation today that you want to share with folks who are listening, or perhaps underscoring a couple key takeaways you hope people bring with them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if a good majority of the audience is in the HR or people ops realm, I would say, step out of that bubble. In fact, pop the bubble, explore and learn as much as you can about other areas of the business, and observe. And the more that you know about the true experiences the employees are having day in and day out, the more you're better be able to have initiatives that are going to solve for their true issues or frustrations. And so I think it's just, learn about as much of the business as possible.
Learn, continue to learn, shadow, really ask those curiosity based questions and continue to understand the business. I think that's a great call to action too. And on Amber, thank you so much for being on
Thank you.
Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Thank you, Christina.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to succeed overall. Have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone.